Hey, hi, hello, welcome to my corner of the internet. My name is Fats, and it's been a minute since I caught you up on the books that have brought me a deep sense of disappointment. And I always label these recent disappointments because it's different for a book to just not hit the mark, and it's different for me to dislike a book. But the feeling of disappointment is so different. I had expectations, I had hopes, I had wants for this, and then I was just left disappointed. Some of these do have far more egregious errors, and some of them are just a quick little problem with. I am coming here with 4 books today in my recent disappointments list. We're going to start off with the quicker explanations for why I haven't had a good time, and then we're going to make our way to the longer explanations. And let's start with Heartless by Elsie Silver. I have been making my way through this series and I've been having a good time. I love the characters and I'm loving the story and I'm loving the family element behind this entire series. My gripe with this one, and the reason it is a disappointment, is I still do enjoy the writing and I enjoy these books. For romances, they hit the mark for me. They're checking all the boxes for me to enjoy a romance. They're not just insta-lust and insta-love, and they do take the time for you to get to know those around the story. Where Heartless comes in is you have Cade, the grumpy older brother who always had way too much on his shoulders. And Cade is a single father as well. Due to a mistaken situation, he is stuck with the world's worst baby mom. He does do 100% of the caretaking for his son. The mother walked out one day, did not want to be a part of this. And Cade has taken on the work of his family's farm, the expectations of being the oldest brother, the care of his family, being the support to his father. Cade has a lot on him, on top of being a father and being there for Luke. There comes a point where Cade just needs a babysitter. He needs a nanny, a live-in nanny, somebody to help him. The hours of being a cowboy aren't easy. In comes Willa. Willa is Summer's best friend. Summer is a character from the very first book. And Willa is just this fiery, bubbly, silly personality. She's so bright and energetic and fun and loyal to her core. But she is also in a weird place in her life. Willa is a bartender. She has worked at her brother's bar, but her brother is going through making this bar into something else. He's making it into a performance place. He's turning it into an auditorium. And Willa doesn't really know where her job is going to come from, what she's going to do, and she has no goals in life, really. So taking some time on the farm and spending some time with her best friend and just getting out into a small town for a summer seems like the perfect experience just to get her back on her feet, help her level her mind, right? So she comes into work as Cade's nanny. My entire gripe with this is that by the end of the book, you know how I told you Willa came in and she was like, I don't know what I want in life and I don't know what makes me happy and I need to reground. By the end of the book, her regrounding and what she wants became motherhood. It became being Cade's partner. It became being a mother to Luke. And this isn't me at all being disingenuous to the joys and beauty that it is to be a mother. It's just that for a character to say that they want to find themselves and they want goals and they want to, and then for the author to be like, don't you worry, this happily ever after, her entire being is now being a mother and making this baby and taking care of this person and being in love with this man. And their love was cute, their banter was cute, whatever. Because even Cade, a big issue in this story was Cade was like, you are young. You haven't lived life. You haven't done enough. I don't want to tie you down. And then by the end, Willow was like, I don't want anything but this. And I want to be happy for her because she has found what she wanted. She has found a purpose. But in every other character, we have a strong surgeon. We have a woman who becomes a personal trainer and builds out a gym. Willa is nothing but that mother. She comes in and has these little moments of being like the funny redheaded friend that's doing these silly things and makes these dirty jokes. But outside of that, she isn't anything. Even Summer, like I said, she has her gym. She's a personal trainer. She's helping out. Winter is literally working on the bull riding circuit, and she's become a mother, but she has so much added to her and who she is outside of that. She loves her motherhood, but she's also a person. Willa, it seems like she came in a person, and then those elements got put aside for motherhood to be her one and only goal in life. And I'm not saying motherhood isn't a goal to strive for and shoot for and love passionately, but you're a person in addition to being a mother. And I feel like Willa's personhood got replaced for motherhood. Didn't like it. But I got to the third book with that accidental pregnancy and I ate that ish up. I don't like accidental pregnancy. I am big team F them kids. But that third book, Theo was saying some crazy things. You know what Leo he looked me in my eyes. Do you know what he said to me? He said, the very first night I met you, I would have taken you into the gas station parking lot and the next book that makes it onto my recent disappointments list is called Listen for the Lie. I just finished this a few minutes ago. And here's the thing. Let me set the scene. You have Lucy. Years ago, Lucy had attended a friend's wedding. However, in the midst of whatever happened between the wedding and what happened after the wedding, Lucy is found covered in her best friend Savannah's blood. Savannah goes by Savvy. And due to either the trauma of the situation or the head injury that she received, she doesn't remember anything from that night. Not a single thing. She remembers getting ready, but from arriving and that night, she doesn't remember anything. In the present day, Lucy is returning home for the first time in years for her grandmother's 80th birthday. She'd do anything for her grandmother. And it just so happens that at the exact same time, there is a podcaster who is doing a cold case podcast trying to get to the bottom of the story. Now, the meddling grandmother, she's trying to set Lucy up. So that's why the whole reason the podcasts are in there and everything is going on, the grandmother's trying to set her up. That's all that is. And at the same time, hopefully it'll give some closure to Lucy herself, because she's never reached closure for this. She's still just sort of skating by and avoiding people who maybe have a different inference of her. Now, the reason this is on my disappointments list is I enjoyed this, from the podcasting to how this was set up and the interviews, and it was such a good audiobook. But as I was listening, you suspected everybody. This person had a dark past. This person had a temper. This person blamed this person. This person's story didn't add up. There was only one person who was just written as this innocent, kind, sweet baby boy. And on Goodreads, I made a joke and I typed something out and I was like, LOL, I bet you it's this guy, the one guy that nobody has anything negative to say about. And he's just a sweet baby. I said that at about the 60% mark. And that was the bad guy. He was secretly not that nice of a guy. And that was like the whole thing. It was like, he was so nice and you just never noticed that he was a really awful guy. The way that they wrote out the end and how he treated Savvy and how he even treated Lucy at a certain point. He was not a cool dude. So it's just one of those things. And then it was like, and he had a temper and I could see how angry he was. It was like, you just never noticed this about him. You never noticed, because a second ago he was just a sweet guy and suddenly and also I always have a problem with those stories where somebody doesn't have a memory and then the ending of the book is them just suddenly getting their memories back. I always have an issue with that. It feels lazy as a plot because the author can just withhold, and then at the end they're like, guess what? She remembers, versus actually putting pieces together. They just withhold until they decide to dump the explanation on you. I thought it was lazy. I thought it was annoying. I thought with the way the podcast was set up and the way he was putting together clues, I genuinely thought this would feel detective-y and we would get clues and twists along the way. But no, it was just, I suddenly remember, here are the answers. Let's capture this guy. That's all it was. But you know what was cool about it? Lucy throughout this story has a voice in the back of her head. And this voice is always trying to convince her to kill, 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 kill. Hit him in the head with the lamp, grab the knife, grab the stone, kill, 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 like that. There's a voice in her head. The audiobook narrator handled that beautifully. I was enjoying everything until I guessed the ending in a joke. I was like, look at this guy who's just so sweet. He has to be the bad guy. Everybody else is like not that sweet. This guy hits his wife. This woman cheats. This woman. Everybody was cheating. There wasn't a single person who wasn't cheating in this book. I don't know who hurt our author. There was not a single loyal person in this entire book. Everybody was cheating. And that was part of it. It was like, here's another cheater. Here's another cheater. Here's somebody stepping out on their marriage. Here's somebody that's lying. Here's so much of that. We had one person who wasn't involved in all of those types of things. One. And I was like, oh, look at the one guy who's loyal and sweet and kind. Doesn't really drink. He's always so been nice. He's always been there for you. He's cared about you. Look at this one guy. Hated that. Hated that. I should be thrilled. I should be in suspense. I shouldn't be able to jokingly guess at the halfway point. Disappointment. Okay. We have to talk about Emily Wilde. Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries has taken BookTube and BookTok by storm. It is a cozy tale of a professor writing the Encyclopedia of Faeries. She's studying the Fae world and the Fae creatures just to get the first written down account of these beings, of these species of being, of magical creature. And the element of Emily Wilde and her all too peppy academic rival Wendell Brambleby. Apparently we get like a cute pining and romance and world building and a coziness and a wintry land. You're supposed to get all of that, right? At most, this book was fine. Just fine. That's it. It wasn't outstanding. It wasn't memorable. It was fine. But it had the makings of something great. I do have a small list of reasons as to why I didn't like it. 1, the format. This is a collection of daily journal entries by Emily on her day-to-day life, just sort of recounting what happened in the day. There is a sense in this story where there was not much description. There was not much setting building. A lot of people say that there was a lot of great world building. There was a lot of lore building. The building of lore and the building of a setting and the building of a world are very different. Lore and setting, very different. There was lore. There was quite a lot of lore, actually. But the actual setting and place of this was not set up at all. There were little bits. You had little parts of places set up, but as a place and a setting, I do think this book could have been so helped if you had interspersed journal entries and then exposition and then maybe like third person omnipresent around that, because it just didn't quite work for me. In that, the footnotes, there were a lot of footnotes in Emily's journal writing. And I'm going to say this, you don't even have to read the footnotes. They don't give you something that takes you forward, and I wasn't even excited about the footnotes half the time. A lot of the times it was just a reference to another text or an extra 5 sentences crammed at the bottom. I hit a point in the book where I didn't even read every single footnote because they took me out of the story and they didn't really add. They were fun and they were quirky and it was an interesting change in formatting, but it didn't add to the story for me. It was fun. It was different. Loved it in theory. I just think that it would have worked if you referenced a fae creature and then described the fae creature. This would reference a text and then say more about the text. And I just didn't care that much about the footnotes. I just really think that in theory, maybe this journal entry, end of the day type of thing could have been cool, but it took away from the story for me. For there to be this, I don't know, just didn't like it. Pacing. I was dreadfully bored for a lot of this. There was a sense in this where the actual plot and storyline of this wasn't flowing. You had a bunch of bylines that we sort of just hopped onto every now and again and maybe reached the conclusion of. I just didn't quite feel drawn through or care about a solution to. But I do think it gave it that almost fairy tale feel, because there are a lot of fairy tales that have that sort of byline type of feel rather than a actual plot dragging me along and climactic moments and twists and turns. But also that could add to what people say is cozy about it, is you just kind of existed in this journal with Emily and Wendell. Speaking of the sort of byline conglomeration of what didn't feel plot heavy, is usually when I read a story, I'm either there for the plot or I'm there for the characters. And there was nothing about this book that I feel like it did in an outstanding manner. From the characters, they weren't something that really pulled me to them. They weren't something that I really felt attached to. From the haberdash of the plot and the story and the setting, wasn't really drawn into and enamored with that. And then one of my biggest issues with this is the romance. Emily is justly, I'm not saying this as against her. Emily's focused on her studies. She's here for a reason. Meanwhile, Wendell is sleeping with half the town in the room next door, and then randomly at the end of the book, he proposes to her. And I'm supposed to also hear him when he was like, I've always liked you and you've never noticed me. And I'm supposed to feel something for that. But it's like, you literally just slept with half the town 2 steps from where she lay her head. There wasn't much like flirting and banter because Emily is justly focused on her studies. Justly. I just didn't. And I do think that as the series continues, you get more of that romance. I'm just not invested in that romance, seeing how it has come to be. I do have an exception to everything I've said, though. Poe. Poe has my heart. And I'm so glad that Poe has found love. Literally Poe being like, yeah, my nice new house, everybody wants me, and I found the prettiest lady for it, of course. Poe had my heart. But again, with that, I wanted more of these fairy creatures. I feel like we are building this encyclopedia, and I wanted to get that, and I wanted to get this land of fae, but I didn't get that. She has this big encyclopedia, and I'm not seeing them pop up, and but she's a professional. But also, are we not going to talk about how randomly violent this woman became with the changeling? That did not feel in Emily's characterization at all. This person that I saw from beginning to end, that random violence against the changeling was wild to me. I don't know where that came from. It's a child. I know it's fae, and it's like haunting these people, but something about that random act of torture was really interesting. And it didn't feel very Emily. She randomly was like, I'm gonna be strong and torture somebody right quick. That was not in character at all. And she was just like, of course I did that. I know a lot. And it was just like, girl, but where's the violence come from? Where did the violence come from? I don't know. I don't want to say I won't continue the series. I've just happened to return the books to the library. When I got through the first one, I just returned the other two because I wasn't excited to go into it. But there is a chance that later down the line, I get FOMO again and I want to get back into the series. And then the second book could convince me of anything. It's just that maybe the first book bit off more than it could chew. Maybe that's it. I don't know. And I didn't get cozy. There was this sort of small town in the middle of nowhere in this snowy place. But again, since I'm in a journal, I didn't get like a description of the town and a description of this. I just kind of had these jolly people bouncing around and random interactions with. But I wanted the town and I wanted the snow and I wanted the forest, but I didn't get that because I had a recount. It just didn't work for me. And, okay, let's just call this a bully romance or something, because Wendell Brambleby, as a romantic interest, just is not working for me right now. They didn't even kiss with tongue. Like, what am I invested in if we haven't even kissed with tongue? Come on. Tango with my molar. Okay. Last book. This book was an insult to mine eyes. And in all fairness, I think it's only fair that I spoil the first half of the book for you, and that'll give you everything you need to know how dumb I think this is. You open up with a prologue, and you have Cassandra, who goes by Cassie. Cassie has entered into her school's talent show, and she has been convinced by her best friend, or ex-best friend, Seth, to decorate a cake and show everybody how much she loves sugar work and sugar spinning. The reason I say best friend or ex-best friend is Cassie and Seth had been like this ever since childhood. However, recently, Seth has been hanging out with their bullies. They used to be locked in and they used to defend each other against these bullies, and they used to support each other and go home and hang out. But recently Seth has distanced himself and he's been hanging out with those school bullies. So even him approaching her and validating her and wanting to join the talent show, he hasn't spoken to her often. Cassie just thinks that Seth just got too hot and too cool for her and he's no longer the awkward boy and she's a bigger girl and maybe he just doesn't want to be seen with her. Well, while she's up there spinning and decorating and she's doing her intro for what she's going to do for the talent show, she hears a screech over the microphone. And then she hears fat shouted by Seth himself over the microphone. And then out of nowhere, her cake comes toppling down on top of her. There's icing everywhere and everybody's laughing and screaming and they're throwing stuff at her and they're shouting that cruel word over and over. And she runs out. Seth comes after her and he grabs her and he's like, Cassie, wait. And Cassie pushes him off and she says, "You're a beast, Seth Brubaker," and then runs out. Now in the present day, it's several years later, and Cassie is returning home. Her grandma has recently passed due to a heart attack, and her grandma was not close to many people in the family. Cassie hasn't been home for years, and due to the fact that the rest of the family isn't close to the grandma, Cassie has been the one to volunteer to clean up her house and maybe put it on the market. At this point in the story, Cassie is 27. Mind you, let me remind you, we said that Cassie hasn't been home this entire time. So she probably graduated high school at 18. She's now 27. So we've got 9 years that she hasn't been home. Doesn't sound to me like she's that close to her grandma, but I'm supposed to be convinced that she is so close to her, and this sounds to me like she wasn't that close. But whatever, let's blow past that. Cassie's in the home. She's been there for 2 days and she's cleaning up. But then on the third day, she looks outside and she sees Seth Brubaker himself coming up to the front door. And he starts pounding the door, and Cassie's gonna ignore it. However, he starts screaming out for Adeline, her grandmother, and he's like, Adeline, are you in there? Adeline, are you okay? Cassie's frustrated and she goes downstairs and she swings it open and she goes to Seth and she's like, I don't know why you're here, but my grandmother just died. And Seth looks distraught. And he's like, just passed, just died. What do you mean? Were there other reasons? Did something lead to that? What happened? Like, why? Why? And Cassie's like, it's none of your business. Okay, first of all, I don't know why I would tell you, because you're one of the worst people that you ruined my life. I literally still have trauma from that horrible bullying experience. And then Seth is like, okay, well, whatever, I made a mistake. And Cassie rightfully is like, mistake? You bullied me. You're my best friend and you bullied me. That's not a mistake. It's not a oopsie daisy. But Seth is like, I need to hear about your grandmother. That was my friend. And Cassie's like, my grandma has a better taste in character. She would never be your friend. And Seth is like, but like, whatever. I'm here because she used to give me some medicine. She used to help me out. And Cassie's like, well, I don't have anything for you. She's not here and I'm not helping you. Go on your merry way. So Seth leaves. Cassie, she sleeps in the house. She's relaxing, whatever. She's had a horrible night of sleep. There is banging in the house. There are boards creaking. There are pipes banging against each other. There's pounding going up the stairs. And she's so tired and exhausted that she accidentally butters a sponge. And the book says that she was still picking yellow fluff out of her teeth by dinner. Okay, just checking in. I'm not going to go bite a sponge to check, but I don't think they are that easy to bite through. So for her to be picking yellow fluff out of her teeth, what sort of aggressive bite did you go for thinking this was toast? And if this was a slice of toast, you would have broken your jaw. Whatever. So Cassie, she's tired. She's going through the house and her grandma has cookbooks hidden and stashed everywhere. And they used to work on these cookbooks together. Cassie's grandmother had told her, don't cook anymore. So Cassie hasn't cooked for ages. But she's feeling sentimental and she's going through a cookbook. And there's something called Feel Better Soup. This is amidst other recipes like potato pie to cure the aches and pains and plum cake to make it rain. Feel Better Soup needs 17 cloves of garlic, as well as a pinch of this and a dash of that. So Cassie gets on her bike and she's going to go right out to the Stop and Save. There's only one. It's a tiny town. The Stop and Save is ran by Old Man Hannigan, who is a big believer that everyone has things a little bit too easy these days. So he has grains that need to be hand milled, things that look like it might be flour, but again, you have to sift it yourself, as well as a sign that says, if your skirt does not go to your knees, I will not be serving you, and another sign that says, please do not fondle the fruit. And I want to cut in to say, the humor of this book just didn't quite work for me. I laughed, but I was laughing in like I can't believe an adult wrote these lines. I can't believe this is what I'm reading. Cassie gets all the things that she needs for the soup, and she returns home. She returns home to find Seth Brubaker halfway climbing through her front window. And do you know what she does? She doesn't pepper spray him. She doesn't call the police. She strikes up conversation and banter to ask him, what are you doing? This is kind of spooky ooky. And they talk and they chat it out. Basically, what she gets to the bottom of is he's looking for a book that his grandmother had for his medicine. She used to make him his medicine. She had a book. And Cassie's like, there's literally like 50 books in here. There's like 50 recipe books. I don't know which one you're talking about. Also, you're literally breaking into my home. Please leave. I don't care if you're my best friend from childhood. If you are breaking into my home, you're catching smoke. I'm calling the police. Why are you doing that? Like, it's not just like a silly little haha, let's have a back and forth quip. I'm taking out my bear mace. Okay, whatever, Cassie. She makes the feel better soup. It's amazing, whatever. She's tired. The night is over. She goes to bed. And she's woken up by thumping. But this is different thumping than the ghosts she thinks are living in her home. This is a rustling. There's glass clinking. So she grabs the hat hanger and goes downstairs. And she finds Seth Brubaker in the hatch basement. He has broken into her home in the middle of the night. And she chooses this moment for some more banter. But before the banter begins, and she goes, Seth, is that you? He turns around and the first words out of his mouth is, I promise this isn't a drug thing. And Cassie responds, that's something that somebody here for a drug thing would say. And then we decide to just keep going back and forth. We don't hit him with the hat hanger. We still do not call the authorities. We chat with this guy. And the reason we chat with him is he's sweating. He looks sick. He's grasping at his stomach. And he's saying that he needs this book so badly. We don't know the book. We banter with him for about 10 pages. 10 pages of banter after he has broken into her home. She literally sets the hat hanger aside. And he goes, okay, well, I've got an idea. You lock me in this basement right now and maybe come get me in the morning. And Cassie is like, not gonna do that. And then he changes into a monster. He attacks her a little bit and then she locks him in the basement. We still do not call the authorities. We still don't do that. We still are not calling anybody. She locks him in the basement and then goes to bed. She wakes up in the morning. They have a back and forth and she's like, have you changed back? And he's like, yeah. And she responds to him to say, I don't believe you. And he quips back to say, there's a Polaroid here. I'm going to take a selfie and I'll slide it under the crack of the door and then you'll know that I'm back to normal. They do that. He's back to normal. She unlocks the door and they chat. No bear mace. No pepper spray, no hat hanger, no authorities. We chat. And he's like, yeah, I'm a werewolf. And she's like, oh my goodness, okay, cool, whatever. How are you feeling? And he's like, well, I'm feeling pretty good, except for, I don't know, my arm is twisted inside out. And then they pan over to his arm. It's literally like broken in half and there's skin hanging off of it and it's twisted upside down. And Cassie's like, I guess the werewolf change isn't that simple. And then he passes out. And so then she's like scared to touch him and she goes over and she's like touching him. And he wakes up and he's like, what you doing? And she's like, I'm just making sure you're alive. And he's like, by fondling my arms and butt. Sir, you passed out. You woke back up to make a quip. You made sure you made a quip before you passed out. I just wasn't resonating with this humor. I wasn't resonating with it. He's like, oh, LOL. Except for my arm. You fondling me? Like that? Where is this girl's like sense of survival instinct? She wouldn't make it a day. A day. So she's like, let's get you into the house. You're obviously not feeling good. How are you doing? And then he's like, hold on. What's in the pot over there? She's like, I made some feel better soup. And he's like, that's my medicine. And she goes, oh, I mean, you want a Tupperware of it? Here's a Tupperware. Gives him a Tupperware of Feel Better soup and then sends him on his way. He returns the next day, and she notices him walking up her stairs, and he paces there. He writes a letter and slides it under her door. The letter is basically like, thank you so much. You're so cool. P.S. You're probably a very powerful witch. She confronts him, right? That's what the letter says. The reason we know what the letter says is when she saw him, she opened the door and she was like, why are you leaving a letter? And he said, oh, you don't want to talk to me anymore. She goes, well, I'm going to read this. You stay right there. And he says, oh, don't read it in front of me. That's awkward. And she goes, no, I'm going to read this because we have a lot to discuss. So I'm going to read this and we're going to figure it out. And he waits there. She reads it. And she's like, what do you mean I might be a powerful witch? He goes, yeah, you probably are. And then she's, of course, having a breakdown. She doesn't believe it. Everything's crazy. And she's like, maybe my grandma was a witch because it's her recipe books. It's her recipe. She wrote them down. And Seth goes, did she really? Are you sure she wrote them down? Or was there somebody else telling her a dash of this, stir it this many times? And then Cassie's like, you're right. I was telling my grandma what to write down. And here's where I lost it. Because the entire magic system of this is Cassie just kind of knows. Literally a situation would come up and she would just kind of know. A problem would come up and she would stand there and then just kind of know. That's it. That's it. No discussion of if her mom might be a witch. No discussion of his grandma was a witch. No discussion of that. She just kind of figures it out. But she's new to this supernatural world and she can't find another witch. And Seth goes, well, I mean, I know some stuff. You know, I know some stuff. And Cassie says, okay, well, how about we make a trade? You inform me of the supernatural world and I will give you some more soup and maybe I can make an even better cure for you. And that's what they do. For the next 30 pages, they discuss literally nothing because this werewolf boy doesn't have much information. The only information he brings is that goblins are kind of mean. They poop marbles and ghosts are probably real. That is it. That is it. That is all they talk about. Their conversations go nowhere. I was reading and I really felt like nothing was coming out of anybody's mouths. It was horrendous. There are a few random scenes that also just sort of dug the knife into how much I was not having a good time. One of them is Cassie asks Seth, so do you just walk around chasing your tail and fetching sticks all day? And he's like, I don't fetch sticks. And she throws a stick. And then we have 3 pages of explanation and joking back and forth about how he really wanted to get it. 3 pages of that. And he's like, yeah, I was clenching my whole body. 3 pages of it. That scene. You're getting nothing from this. You don't understand the world at all. You're getting quite literally nothing. You're not learning about the world. You're not learning about you're not learning anything about it. Now, a few other bonus things that happened. Granny is apparently the one haunting the house, doing all the stomping and the banging. One day, Cassie leaves her laptop open in a half-written email. And Granny Adeline decides to type out a message. And her message says, I was afraid for you, my darling. And Cassie does not take that opportunity at all to ask Granny questions, to ask what's going on, to better understand. Cassie doesn't take that moment at all. All she does is go, it feels nice to know that like somebody loves me on the other side. And that's it. You don't know anything about witches. You don't know anything about your powers. You don't know anything about the supernatural world. This boy who wants to fetch sticks and taste his tail doesn't know much of anything. All he told you is about goblin poop. And you didn't take this moment with your grandmother, who you're apparently so close to, who you haven't seen for 9 years, and you don't take that moment to ask some questions. She goes, oh, she loves me, and then went to sleep. Now, page 254 is a scene. Please get your children out of the room. Okay? Because this scene was honestly the worst of the worst. So, they're in a fairy home trying to get an ingredient for a spell, and they're hiding in a closet because there are some murderous werewolves on their tail and want to get them, right? Mind you, the tensions are high. Why are they high, you ask? Because they have bonded and their hormones are spiked up so high because in a werewolf bonding ritual that he apparently knows about, they will die if they do not consummate. They will die. Now, I'm sure you're wondering, if somebody approached me and I was feeling a lot of hormones and they were feeling a lot of hormones, and you looked me in my eyes and said, oh no, if we don't consummate, we'll pass away, I would say, just the tip. You know, like I would get that done. I'm going to save my life. They were literally just like yearning because of this chemical bond thing and risking their life. You could literally tell me we could do this and we could be attached for life. And I'd be like, I don't want to die. Get that thing over here. We'll figure that out later. So their hormones are ramped up because of a bond that could kill them if they don't handle things, right? And they're in this closet and they're so close and the pheromones are so strong that Cassie starts getting a little up close and personal. Last warning, get your kids out of the room. Cassie's been pressing herself up against Seth, right? And Seth says, oh my goodness, are you turned on right now? Which was fair, given that she was rubbing up on him. But she had to at least try denying it. No, of course not, she snorted very unconvincingly. Cassie, you just tried to F my leg. Oh, come on, I wasn't trying to do that. You're still doing it right now. I can feel you squirming. He was right. No matter how much she tried to keep herself still, she found it almost impossible to do. That thick muscle of his had spread her thighs too effectively. She means his leg, because his leg is between her legs. That's kind of a wild way to phrase that. That thick muscle of his had spread her thighs too effectively. It had given her too solid and warm a thing to make contact with. It seemed almost unnatural not to ease the ache between her legs by using it, even if using it was really bad and not something she could accept. Maybe I'm just uncomfortable with your big thigh right there. And did that big uncomfortable thigh also make you this moisturized? She tried to snort dismissively to that question too, but this one was harder. Because goodness, it shocked her that he could tell, that he knew. And grasping that he did made her denials clumsy. You can't possibly know something like that, she said. Which of course only confirmed he was right. Not that he needed confirmation. Of course I can, Cassie. I can hear it every time you move. Well, maybe you're just not listening right. Maybe it's something else. There isn't anything else that sounds like something slick sliding over a swollen, flushed little beep, 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 beep. What do you mean? So what? They're walking through the house and what does he hear? Is that what's going on? Is that what's happening? Ew. Or he was like, I've never heard anything that wet. So it's not even that. It's more like, is that what he's hearing? Is that what he's hearing? It's disgusting. Burn it. Burn it. If you want any other like fun little spoilers that occur in this book, he turns out to be a virgin because his werewolf gets set off every single time he gets like really energized. If he gets aroused or angry or scared, when his emotions are up, he changes. So he couldn't do anything. He's a virgin. Whatever. He's so skilled and so good and so fantastic because he's been watching stuff. He learned. The reason he is a werewolf is because that day that they bullied Cassie, which he poorly explains off as an accident at the very end. I'll get to that in a second. But that day that Cassie pushed him and said, "You're a beast, Seth Brubaker," her magic turned him into a beast. So how does he know anything about anything when he's a magic? Like, that just seemed like a huge misstep in plot writing for it to be like, oh yeah, no, your magic turned me into a thing. Her magic and that entire concept of magic just doesn't make sense. She just knows how to make potions and she knows how to bake stuff. But also this one time she got so mad and she turned somebody into a werewolf. How has this not popped up before? Has she never felt a strong emotion ever since? As a child, did she not feel a strong emotion and shout something on the playground? How did this happen? How? It genuinely doesn't make sense. She's just like this ultimate powerful human being. And after we find out that her magic changed him, right? She doesn't think, I should maybe start training magic. She's like, dang, that's crazy. And then's like, let me go make some more soups and potions and baked goods. Because I just kind of know. That's the story. I can't believe those words graced my eyeballs. And I really hope that all the people who are gassing this up on the internet I'm not going to wish anything poor on you. I'm not, because you don't deserve that. But honestly, false advertising is a crime. And all the people who like rate really highly on Goodreads, I don't think everybody's reading the book. They're not reading these books. If you liked it, I like you. And I take it back. Because we're friends. And if you heard that he was listening to her squelch through the house and you went, ew, this is a safe space. That's all I have for you. Next week, I'm working on something different. Whenever I sit here, I don't know if you guys ever see it, but this is my coffee table. And I am a lover of magazines. I read magazines, I buy periodicals, I'm always looking for new periodicals, I'm always reading an article here and there, I'm always looking at interviews, and a lot of my thoughts and interests and a lot of the things that I learn and know about actually come from the fact that I'm always reading a different publication here and there. And I think it would be fun if next week I don't know how I'm going to do it, because it's not just super simple for you to get a hold of certain periodicals. Once they sell out, they sell out. So maybe I will find a way to let you in on some of my favorite articles or favorite things from certain bits and bobs. But that's what we're going to do next week. I'm going to give you a different type of reading material. But until then, I'm going to talk to you next time.